Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Lucid, and in the last episode, we popped up this victory screen. You reign supreme. You are the Pantocrator. Your enemies are cast down, broken, dead, enslaved, or imprisoned. You are the sole author of fate. You summon the tides. You dictate the seasons. Give or withhold fortune and life. You light up the sun at the dawn and quench its fires at dusk. All move according to your will. Endless eons pass. But then, at some unknowable time, there is change. Something stirs in the void. You perceive something reminiscent of ancient longings and doubts that you thought forgotten. Perhaps suggestive of a sight unseen or a tune unheard. What is this thing, this longing, this faraway, fleeting enigma? You lift your presence from the world, ascend from the thrones, and rush into the void, racing after that receding, beckoning something. Borne on wings of absolute authority, you race farther and further away, chasing that soul thing that you do not understand, still further away. Leaving the world behind you, it becomes a fleeting memory, a distant dream, a tune unheard and a sight unseen. Down on the world you left behind, old servants and enemies. They feel their chains loosen. Doors thought forever shut slowly creep open, and ancient things, long thought dead, stir. The thrones still sit empty, but hungry eyes have turned their gaze upon them, sensing a new dawn. I don't know if I've ever read that in full on this channel for you guys, but Illwinter can do some pretty good writing. Okay, we're going to look at score graphs. So, let's do a brief summary for each nation and kind of what happened in this game. Arco, one of the main powers, they got 2v1'd at the start of the game. They were attacked by Marignon, and they were attacked by Bogarus. They were getting kind of their ass kicked, and then their god woke up, and they stomped some armies, and then they came over here and fucking conquered Marignon. Salut, Marignon. It was a tough ride, because I jumped in to help Arco, and I got some of the Marignese spoils. Then we have Bogarus. Bogarus failed to put down Arco, and losing your first war, failing to win your first war, he didn't lose it, is always tough. They then got attacked by Raga. You can see jumped up a little bit here. But then Bogarus put Raga down. Said, no, you're not going to get my shit for free. But before they could really turn that into gains, I think they were getting attacked by Patala. Patala jumped in, was like, I want some of that Russian shit, that good free shit. Give me some of that. I think that was about right here. And this was also about the time that Ctis jumped in. And Ctis and Patala came in and basically put Bogarus down. I forget exactly where. I think that was right here. This was a small gain for both of us. So anyway, that was the story of Bogarus. They fended off Raga valiantly, and then Patala and I came in and ate them. Patala attacked a bit earlier, got put down, but did not lose faith, and attacked again, and then that time succeeded with our aid. Raga, moving on to Raga, got kind of locked up in a war with Pan. And they kind of battled to the death until Patala came and tried to put Pan down. We'll flash up Patala again here. Patala came to put Pan down and kind of eventually did, sort of, but then Patala got put down by Kalem before that could really be fully manifested. Man was my neighbor and a top position player for a while. They had an Awake Expander, so they expanded super well. They also somehow managed to not have Utgard, one of their neighbors, with a bless basically specifically designed to make Man fucking miserable. Did not attack Man. They just let Man be. And they waited until man had exactly the tools that they needed to completely crush and destroy Utgard. And crush and destroy them they did. So Utgard kind of just stayed still, wasn't doing anything. And then man decided to attack them and smelt their ruin upon the mountainside. Truly. Once Gifts of Heaven comes out for man, Utgard with their blood bond bless really just could not take a proper fight. They did a few tricks. They did some magic duel, which is supposed to be the thing that breaks man. But man was piloted by an experienced player, Kosk. He knew how to deal with these things. And while it did slow him down at times, because Utgard did come out swinging, and even when properly counted, these hell-blessed Garms do still demand some respect. Man crushed them. If Utgard had attacked man early, they would have had to have made major blunders to have not won that fight. With the particular bless they had, it was going to be such a one-sided matchup against man, I think. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. My boys Ulm representing. Ulm, position 2 when the game ended. He worked to... God, who was his first war? Not 100% sure. I know... I think he might have vultured a little bit his first war. I'm not totally sure. The first time I engaged with Ulm, it was putting down Vedheim. So I think this might have been his first war. But yeah, he put Vedheim down pretty fierce. Maybe Utgard also helped. I'm not really sure who all put Vedheim down, come to think of it. I know Vedheim was attacking Felegra, who we haven't really talked about too much yet. Vedheim was attacking Felegra, and then Ulm pitched in against Vedheim. And I pitched in to help Ulm with Vedheim, because I don't want Illwinter going up as Ctis. I didn't want that one little bit. But yeah, the story of Felegra basically is they had a pretty good opening expansion. They got, I think, 2v1. They were attacked by Utgard. They were attacked by Vedheim. But then, Ulm came to their aid, and then I came to Ulm's aid, and Vedheim got put down. Utgard then had very pressing other issues to deal with. Namely, they had to deal with man, the very well piloted man. And then Felegra was kind of free, but about the same size they were at the start of expansion. So Felegra then had to figure out what to do, and they decided to go on Erythia. And that seemed to sort of work, because Erythia was kind of getting smacked down by 3 players at this point. However, Erythia got a sub, and the sub came in, redid all the Diplo, shed a bunch of land to make some players happy, got out of the 3v1, and was left in a 1v1 with Felegra. And Erythia just scripted their army super well. They had a few mistakes. So, but not like cognitive mistakes exactly, more like wrong clicks. And armies that were supposed to participate with mages didn't show up because things were not clicked correctly. And a few Erythian armies were lost that need not have been. Despite that, though, Erythia still ended up just having really good scripting. A lot of it was like Foul Vapor stuff on top of troops. He had different ways to deal with Lais Dragonians, and he put Felegra down. Felegra stayed at their cap for a while until I came in and finished them off. But yeah, Felegra, at this point, it was like a mercy killing for Felegra because they had stayed basically at the same size all game. You can't really do that and hope for a good outcome. We've already talked about Marignon. We didn't really finish the Arco story. I think we'll do Arco a little bit closer to the end with the whole story. Jomen is a story I actually don't know. I didn't really neighbor them. I don't really know what happened to them. I couldn't even point to their capital on the map. Presumably Erythia killed them, but I'm not sure. Calum, a little bit of a sleeping giant, was a top-end expander, but then kind of chilled. Was not necessarily like the biggest player, Like, we were a little bigger than them. But what they did was they built a fuck ton of forts. They built a lot of forts. Their research was just crazy, guys. Look at this. They were twice everybody else's research at least. And they had, citadels, so they were getting like a lot of mage production. And they were really in a position right about here to start doing crazy shit, like being hyper aggressive and doing bird stuff where you just start taking over the map. I think the main mistake that Caleb made is they need to understand that, like, here's the research graph, right? So the research you're getting from here up doesn't matter that much. These are like your low priority 9s. It's like you still want to get them, but they don't matter. And after this, like, imagine right here, you have 2 9s basically at this point usually. Nobody else has 9s or even is terribly close. The only person who's reasonably close to catching up is Ulm, but also a little bit of Arithia, but like Arithia is very flat right now. Ulm is pretty steep. But yeah, really it's a timing issue with Caleb. At this point, when they have like a severe research advantage, they need to just be crushing people, right? So like, look how flat they are through this. And this was like some negotiated things. They did a great job negotiating and like getting more stuff. Like they played the diplomacy game actually really well. I think they had actually, very good relationships with people. They were a ton of fun to talk to. Everybody liked Caleb, even though they were like kind of terrified of the research lead they had. But what Caleb needed to do was probably not they probably should have started a little early, like when they got their first 9, like way back here. Start going ham. And by the time, like, maybe other people are starting to turn on them, that's when they get their second 9 or something like that. This is not necessarily exactly a Caleb-specific strategy. It's more reacting to, like, the game state and their relatively huge research advantage. So if you're Caleb in a different game and you don't have a research advantage, this isn't necessarily what you should do. But, like, starting right around here, they needed to just go freaking ham and just start plowing people. And, yeah, I think they could have totally pulled away with the game. Because the thing is if they can have an army you can't kill or even damage, then it doesn't matter, especially with a nation this mobile, it doesn't matter that much if they get 3 or 4v1'd. But everybody was so worried about them and talking about it, they knew if they started going ham, they would get 3v1'd, which they probably would have. I was ready to jump on that dog pile if they started going ham, because they were in a position to just straight up run away with the game. But Caleb, especially given that there was like Ulm and late age Ctis, which scales really well, but also Arithia, which can do Nexus farms and stuff, and then Arco, which had an alteration discount site, which he probably didn't know. But given those things, that he wasn't going to scale the hardest, he did need to make a timing play, right? Like, he did need to be able to commit and go for it, and this was like the right time to commit. Somewhere in this range, right? You just say, like, okay, we're going for it. Doesn't mean you attack everybody. It just means you, like, talk nice to everybody. You delete one player in 3 or 4 turns. And then you're like, oh, no, I'm just going to sit tight and, like, hang out. And then you get ready. And, like, 3 or 4 turns later, you have all the things you need to just delete the next player. And you delete them in, like, 3 or 4 turns. And probably, like, halfway through that war, so, like, 2 turns are into it, you probably have 3 of your neighbors declare war on you, and the naps start ticking down. And you have 2, by the time the naps tick down, you've killed that second player. And by then, they're like mobilizing majors, they're getting ready to fight, but you now have 2 extra players worth of stuff. And then you just have to fight that war and win it. You could also try to throne rush too. I personally don't support that, so I'm not going to really advocate it exactly, though that's certainly a play you can make as the birds. But I don't think you need to make that play. I think you just, like, if you kill 2 players, like, let's look at this is the province graph. If you kill 2 players, you're up to here. And you're number 1 in research. You can very easily turn this into just a winning position, where even if you slightly lose a war against one of the players, if you win hard against another one of the players and you stall a third, that might be enough to win you the game because you've stalled one, you've crushed another one, so you're now getting a major bump up, and you're taking like minor attrition, like maybe you're losing a rating war or something against another, you give up a fort. And Calum has a bunch of things they can do, like Wind of Death and stuff, that are going to be really good for a large portion of the game. So yeah, anyway, I think you just have to kind of nut up and be ready to fight a coalition. You can't, I think the main learning, if you guys are looking at this, is if you understand you have an important timing to make, which a lot of these players didn't have important timings. Ulm didn't have an important timing. Erythia didn't really have an important timing. I didn't have an important timing. None of these nations were really on the clock. And given Arco had those sites, Arco didn't have a timing really either, exactly. Calum had like a very clear timing. They were a huge research leader. They didn't have late game scaling options like the other nations. I mean, it's a good late game nation in ways, but they just don't have the economy scaling that other nations do. So anyway, if you have a timing that you need to make, given the nation you've picked and the situation in the game at the time, then you got to pull the trigger on it. Can't be afraid of getting coalition because you have a timing to make. Make your play. And consider this. To win a Dominions game, you basically, unless you're really trying to weasel out a throne steal, like where you just sneak thrones, which again, I don't support exactly. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it, but it's not something I think is a fun way to play the game. You basically have to fight everybody. Like you can't be too afraid of getting coalition. I think that's kind of what happened to Calum. You can't be too afraid to get coalition. When it's your time to like make the push to win, you need to make the push to win and push to win. Bada bing, bada boom. So anyway, that's Calum. Ctis will come back to us last. Pangea. They had their main battle was here against Raga, where you can see there was a big kind of hoop from both sides. They kind of met back in the middle. Pan kind of got ahead. They both kind of puttered out. I think the Pan-Raga saga is basically about knowing when to get out of a bad war. Clearly, this was a bad war. The problem is it might not be obvious what the other war you should win is. But I don't know. This war was a little grudgy. Probably would have been good for them to just let that go. Like, I think a lot of times, if you're taking a war for greed because you want land, which is what you're doing a lot of the time, unless you're trying to put down somebody running away with the game, if you ever get put down, like you attack them and your army gets slapped down, you should be ready to instantly negotiate for peace. Not always, there's sometimes you're playing an attrition strategy and, this was like an acceptable calculated loss. But like a lot of times when you have designs on somebody's shit, you need to be ready to just be like, okay, I thought I could take this cheaply, but you've played really well. I can't take it cheaply. I also don't think you can take stuff from me. Let's just peace out. If either one of those players came up with that offer at the right time, hopefully the other one would accept. I think there's some lesson in there about that for these players. I don't know what that point is. I don't understand all the battles and when they happened or anything about how it would be. The only thing I think I know is that I think they were locked in a long, grindy war for a very long time. Midgard. Dear God, I have no idea what happened to Midgard. But somebody munched the shit out of them. I can't tell who it is. Bogarus. Let's pull the Ruskies up again. Yeah, we covered them. We've already done that, actually. Patala, we've talked about them, too. This was them eating part of Bogarus. And then this was them getting attacked by Calum. Raga, we've talked about as well. Allegra, we've talked about as well. Vedheim, they got put out kind of early. They went, basically, again, they attacked Falegra with Utgard, but then Falegra killed a bunch of their shit, and then Ulm attacked them, and then I attacked them. And then Erythia, we've talked about them. The only persons we haven't really talked about now are Ctis and Arco. We talked about Arco a little bit at the beginning. But yeah, let's put all the graphs up now as we talk about my province count and kind of my general story and Arcos. So Arco, let's see, who's game leader? Flegra was game leader here. Their game leader... that's not Flegra. Who is that? Wait, whoops. Oh, wow. Arithia's game leader for a while. Their game leader for like turn 10 to 30. After that, we poke our head above up in provinces for a little bit. And we stay pretty close to position 1, but never get very far ahead. And the other thing that's important is everybody in this game thought Late Age Ctis was weak, except Arco. Arco was the one person who kind of turned on to like, hey guys, some shit's going down. But conventionally, everybody, and myself included, I put Late Age Ctis as very low on the scale, because I could never come up with a build that satisfied me for not being vulnerable early and also scaling well. But I think we might have figured it out. Anyway, and nobody had ever seen this. A few players have played the Late Age Ctis. I'm sure Late Age Ctis has won games, but I don't think it's ever had the showing that we gave it here. So anyway, it was very easy for me, even if I was close to position 1, to not attract too much aggro, because everybody thinks Late Age Ctis sucks. That's the nice thing about picking a nation that everybody in the community thinks is a dumpster nation. So that was something we had going for us. We weren't picking an obviously strong nation. And by the way, there are a lot of nations which are pretty obviously strong in the game, like Ulm, like Bogarus, like Utgard. These are very well-known top-end nations, Rago. So we did a pretty good job just being about as big as we could be, as big as we could possibly be, without really attracting too much attention. And by the time we started attracting attention, where we started being like kind of a clear position 1 in terms of provinces, the person we were in position 2 with was Ulm, and they were our close buds. We'd been working together. We had a lot of trust. There was some things where we were getting bigger faster than Ulm in this period. And I think this is a period where Ulm should have been very... I didn't know this at the time, by the way. I didn't have like a calculation. I didn't have graphs. Arco had them because he had Eyes of God. He might have been sharing it with people. He wasn't sharing it with me. I didn't know this. But this would have been a period of concern. However, Ulm traditionally was thought to scale up better than Ctis. So, anyway. But yeah, I mean, our story, if we want to cover our story, we vultured Marignan after Arco basically turned the 2v1 around and ended up smashing Marignan. We then basically had it was mostly a 1v1. I don't know. I wouldn't call it a 1v1. But we were the principal person fighting Bogarus, and we had to fight pretty much their whole mage corps. But we fought them after they had Raga. Basically, they'd been cycle charged by Raga and then Patala. Raga and Patala both got armies killed by Bogarus defending themselves very vigorously. Raga to the point they were basically on a path to extinction. Patala just to the point where they had to regroup, but they also had to let us do a lot of the heavy lifting and putting down Bogarus, and we did that. And then Patala got some spoils from it. After that, I believe we turned around to vulture a bit of Flegra because Arythia had put them down, and so we got some of their stuff, including their cap. When that all was happening, we had to make a choice about whether to support Ulm against Man. We also helped a little bit with Vedheim, somewhere in that mix. The spoils we got from that were really small. It was like 3 or 4 provinces. We then went against Man with Ulm. And that was a really fun war. That was probably one of my most favorite wars of the whole game. Just in the sense that the guy playing Man, Kosk, played really well, had pretty well scripted armies. I felt really bad about kind of doing a 2v1, but the truth in Dominions too is once you get to the late game, you can't really afford. Like, I had to manage my size. There was no real nation I was going to eat, where I was going to eat all of them by myself and then not get immediately coalitioned afterwards. So I think as much as it sucks, especially as the game goes on, you just have to acknowledge that most wars, like in the last half of a game, are usually going to have, for that reason, you can't really, it's very difficult as one of the top powers to execute a true 1v1 against a comparable sized player. Because if you win it and take all their stuff, everybody's going to fight you. So anyway, it would have been more fun. I kind of was wanting to save Man as like the final boss, but it was a really fun mid-game war. And I think Man played really well. They definitely took many pounds of flesh from Ulm. They tried to take a lot of pounds of flesh from us, but I think it was just a really tough matchup for them, given our bless and the amount of like the quantity of stuff we had by that point. And then after Man fell, then it was time to go after Calum because they were doing their throne rush. They ended up taking a lot of the Man spoils and then executing their throne rush. That, of course, didn't work for them. And then everybody was like a mad vulturing of Calum. You can see, look how quickly Calum fell. It's crazy. So there's a mad vulturing of Calum by everybody. And then after Calum fell, then Ulm basically had to choose, did they want to join with Erythia and Arco and attack me, or join with me and attack them? And in hindsight, it's very easy to say that Ulm should have joined with them and attacked me. I think if they could have, I think this is actually the missing ingredient, is if they had managed to cut Ulm in to Nexus, then I think that would have made sense for all of them. And I think I probably would have lost there. That might have been a losing move for me if they figured that out. I had a chance to win, though. But it'd been very hard, because you would have had 3 players spending into Nexus. Because most of the time when Nexus goes up, players don't spend. But they would have all been spending and then splitting the Nexus profits from that. And then, by the way, they might have even I don't think they would have let Ulm in on the Wish Farm. I think they would have kept that an Erythia Arco only thing. But they would have maybe cut Ulm in if they weren't winning that war. So I don't know. I think if they had turned it into a 3v1 here, that would have been the only way to do it. Would have been if they all 3 split Nexus, which they didn't want to do. Like, Erythia and Arco did not want to split it with Ulm, because Ulm was the classically hardest scaling nation. I would have loved to have subbed in for Ulm at some point, like in this window. This would be a really fun point to have subbed in for Ulm, just so I could pilot the nation, because it's one of my favorite nations. I love late age Ulm, and this would have been a super interesting scenario to pilot them through. If I were to drop in for Ulm, I would have been comfortable, I think, taking either deal. I would have been comfortable making a deal with Ctis, where I split Nexus. I would have preferred a deal splitting Nexus with Ctis, even knowing that I was playing Ctis. If it was like a cloned copy of me. And knowing the full details of the strat with the tomb, like the life after death bullshit, right? So I would have still been comfortable doing a Nexus play, I think, with Ctis. That would have been my second choice after splitting Nexus equally as a 1/3 partner with Erythia and Arco. But if I could have had the option to split equally as a 1/3 partner with Erythia and Arco, I would have chosen that over being a 50-50 partner with Ctis. But if I was going to be like a 10% partner and they were going to, or like a 20% partner and they were going to be like 40-40, I probably would have gone with Ctis. That's how I just feel about it in terms of like my personal preferences. And you might be like, why would you ever ally with Ctis? And I'll tell you the answer. It's because I think I could have beaten Ctis as Ulm, subbing in somewhere right around here. And we're going to talk, that's one of the main things I want to talk about in this episode. Not to like second guess Ulm because I think Ulm played really well. But just because I think it's interesting. I think it's really fucking interesting. I love, it's one of my favorite nations. And it uses a lot of generic blood magic. So there's a lot of things, and I play a lot of blood nations. So I think there's a lot of things to draw on. And this is stuff I've all talked with Ulm about too. But yeah, and then, so I think that's what we'll do next. And then I'll talk a little bit about, I think basically every other nation, like all the communion nations, should just try to copy what Erythia did. I think Erythia played great. Just look how they scripted their battles. That was really good. The only thing I think they could do more of is like bigger master and slave and bigger undead mastery spam with more pin. Those things were pretty punishing, and it's a great way to get really high quality sacreds. And once you hit a critical mass of it, it can be really punishing. The thing, though, is that the more you do it, the more I'm going to gym bait you. And I can gym bait you super easily as late age Ctis. So it's not like it's a silver bullet. But that's also a reason why gym baiting is important. Because if you can't gym bait stuff at all, especially these really high, like super expensive spells, then those spells would be really oppressive. So anyway, yeah, I think pretty much all the communion nations copy what Erythia did. Erythia did great. I mean, Arco scripted pretty well too. They just kind of failed morale checks towards the end. But I think Erythia scripted things really, really well. I think if they took all the knowledge they had at the end of this game and went back to the start of their war with me, they would have done significantly better. I feel like they learned a lot through playing, and by the end of the war, they understood the matchup a lot better, such that if they were to sub back into their own position earlier in the game, they would have, I don't know if they would have won, they would have put a much bigger hurting on me. So I think that's the main advice for other kind of communion nations in the late age for how to play, which is copy them. Ulm, though, we're going to talk a little bit about. So the big thing I already mentioned, I think, is Dark Vines. Dark Vines are like the blood unit to use against Ctis. There's a few reasons for this. Let's see if we can find the spell here. So it's this. Awaken Dark Vines. For 12 slaves, you get 2. Now, they're pretty expensive. They have a ton of hit points, which means they can regen for a ton. They have armor-piercing attacks, which is great in the late game. And they have really good MR. These are the most important traits for them in this particular matchup. I think at a minimum, every army you field needs at least a double line. I mean, at least a single line and ideally a double line of Dark Vines. Then you probably also need a Storm Staff to keep me from jumping past your Dark Vines. And then behind that, you can put Storm Demons. Those are pretty good. I think that's the main way to fight this with blood. The assassin stuff he was trying at the end is great. I think that's probably better for when I'm fielding like sloppy, smaller, medium armies that usually aren't going to have as much gear on commanders. And yeah, maybe like real assassins, like vampire assassins, to try to get some of the things too. That said, it's something y'all didn't see because I was missing a few turns. Man had a ton of vampire assassins, and I killed them all. So, not easy. Not easy. But these, I think the Dark Vines are super duper important. The other thing Man can do is they can do the stuff Erythia was doing. They have, unlike Erythia, Astral Death. Ulm will get on their nation. They have Fortune Tellers, which can random death. So these are Undead Mastery casters, which is nice. That way you're not always using pearls to steal worms. And then they have Astral coming out of every pore on their body. They have so much Astral, right? You're even going to get a few Astral 3s, which is kind of nice. But yeah, I mean, just having Recruit Anywhere Astral 2s, you throw up Light of the Northern Star, you put some pin gear on them, you give them a big enough communion, bada bing, bada boom. You've got a very nice Master and Slave casting. So really we're seeing they kind of have a lot of the tools they're going to need to do good work. And there's not a ton of reliance here on, um, important things like master and slave. I don't know. There's not a big reliance on demons, which will be vulnerable to demonic cleansing. Like, I think Dark Vines for a front line, Storm Demons behind, and then Master and Slave is a threat. It's really expensive to bring enough mages together to do like a really, really hard hitting Master and Slave stack. And I'm also going to try to hit those with Flames from the Sky. So you have to be kind of careful in how you deploy that and maybe take items off it if you think they're about to get hit, stuff like that. Ghoul Guardians are also great to use. We'll blow them up with stuff like Wither Bones. But they're still super solid. I mean, the human troops are nice too. You can also mass crossbow. They don't have great MR, but with anti-magic and Will of Fates and mass regen, they're still something to consider. And I don't have very good air access, so it's unlikely. I'll put up Aerofend if he were to mass Rangers in important fights, but I probably won't have it up all the time. I think Ranger massing is another thing to consider. Yeah, I don't think things like Iron Blizzard are going to be ultra effective here. I'm trying to think if there's anything in particular I missed. No, I think those are the main strategies. Yeah, I think those are the main strategies. The other thing that is useful, everybody kind of started figuring it out towards the end. But I think, and Ulm could have done this too, but it's basically the idea of doing battlefield wipes against me because I've got, a lot of kind of chaff-esque troops. I don't want to call Tomb Worms chaff, but, they sort of were. But basically using tarts. Now, we saw Arithia use them a fair amount, and they would use tarts to do Firestorm, and he would have them buffed up with all the things, and they'd have a bunch of, like a full kit of items on them. I think that's basically Mission Impossible. There's no way to use tarts to like solo an army with Firestorm or something, anything like that. I don't think that's not going to work. And the reason is because we have good mage support, they'll just blow them up. However, I think you can possibly use them as in-army casters. So like an army of Storm Demons, you could possibly hold up Wrathful Skies for a while if you have enough Storm Demons. By the way, the other thing, we were looking at Dark Finds. Dark Finds don't give a fuck about Wrathful Skies, not if they have regen on them. I mean, they care a little bit, but they'll just regen back up. So that's, again, like an army of Storm Demons and Dark Vines. You can, if you had like an air tart that you put a lot of gear on, you can have them cast Wrathful Skies into that. It's not a problem. There's going to be a bunch of damage reversal coming through, but you can just regen through it as a Tartarian. So that's another thing you can add to this to deal with it. But now you're starting to see, like, if I were to put together this army, it would actually be really... I wouldn't actually... If I were playing both positions, but I didn't know it, so I wasn't privy to the thoughts of the other person. But, like, if I saw that army that Ulm was putting together, made up of Dark Vines, made up of Storm Demons, backed up by Master and Slave casters, with, like, other retail evocation coming out... maybe like Enslaved Mind Spam. By the way, they're also doing... they have like a tart or two, like an air random tower doing Wrathful Skies on top of the whole jig with, Will of Fates and all that bullshit. I wouldn't want to fight that conventionally. I would start doing very strange and obscure tactics, and I would be very careful. Those are really expensive armies, by the way, that I'm talking about. So I would probably have enough leeway to try to dance around them and try to really keep my important armies away from them. So then I'm like doing this weird dance. I'm trying to move things around, but Ulm also has really good raiding and counter raiding potential with Send Horror and all those things. So I think it's a super interesting matchup. I think it's super interesting. Because like I think how it would evolve would be like Ulm's moving around these armies I was just describing. Ctis is kind of moving away with their other army, but trying to get those armies on forts. So we're moving like medium armies around. Most of the medium armies are going to be resistant to things like Send Horrors and Lesser Horror. They're not going to be bothered by it. But we're going to have some light stuff too that could be hit by it. And have to be super careful about my Doom stacks to not let them run into like these Ulmish Hell Squads. So I don't know. I think it's really, really, really interesting. I think there's also more stuff Ulm can do. Ulm could have tried throne rushing with like a bunch of Fiends of Darkness. I know this is something Erythia was really worried about. You know, like he could have 300 Fiends of Darkness, which are stealthy, and Ulm has stealthy recruit everywhere mages. So it could be this entire stealth army just pops up on top of a throne. They could have tried to sneak a throne win that way. But yeah, I think, and other players were breaking into blood too. Like Arco had a lot of blood. They could have done very similar strategies, but they didn't have the level that Ulm did. So yeah, I think the other thing to maybe think about, to maybe add to any of the players' playstyles, is getting top-end summons that have really high magic resistance in particular that can hold the line against worms. And there's probably a fair number of them. The issue is those types of high-quality summons tend to be really expensive, and you usually don't want them getting hit by Banefire and Drain Life and stuff, which would certainly be happening. So I'm not sure if that's really a winning idea, but I think, you know, that's a pretty good way to spend gems and slaves. So yeah, I think we've commented this pretty thoroughly now. My closing thoughts. Let's talk a little. Oh no, we'll not do closing thoughts yet. I'll talk a little bit about my build. Would I change anything about it? No. I don't think so. The Bless was pretty solid. I don't think I regret any part of it. I think it was pretty sick. The God, Mommy Milkers, she just hard carried us through this game. Super hard carried us. Yeah, I mean, she was the entire reason we were able to expand, that we won our first war, we won our second. The second war we won mostly without her, to be fair. She broke us into blood. We were a huge blood powerhouse by the end. She cast Wish a bajillion times. She cast Nexus. I mean, she just hard carried our nation, right? In conjunction with all of her little baby snicks. You can see she really is the snick mama. And yeah, I mean, guys, this is one of the best Pretender chassis, by the way. And this is an amazing bless for this particular Pretender chassis. Fate Weaving is so good on her with like Soul Vortex and Poison Cloud and stuff. Yeah, this is a great build. There's a bunch of people, if you go to my Discord, who've modified versions of this build for Dominion 6. The main change is that if you picked a build where you're planning on using Life After Death to convert mages in Dominion 6, you can't do that anymore, which it kind of sucks that like some people started games where they picked... The thing is, it's not even just a strategy you have, you build it into your Pretender. You do like Mending Bones so that you can remove afflictions from your Twiceborn guys. And yeah, now it's like, then you can't do it. It's not a completely worthless bless. I mean, it's still nice to have Mending Bones on your worms, on your white mages, and your Tomb Kings. It's not a useless bless, but it, you know, does kind of suck that it's probably not worth it anymore, and you picked it. But anyway, yeah, there's a bunch. If you go on my Discord, I think there's a few threads on late age Ctis. You can see people posting various takes on this. There's probably other ways to... I don't think you only need Blood Vengeance. The thing that Blood Vengeance is really good against... and there's other changes with Ctis too that we mentioned in the start of this whole series when we did the national overview and covered the new Dominion 6 units. The Scales units are better. You could take Scales and you go just on, like, you're basically relying on the troops and such, and you just take Blood Vengeance. And then you use the Worms just to keep people from doing battlefield wipes against your Tomb Chariots. It's another super viable way to play. So yeah, I'm not actually sure what's optimal in Dominion 6 anymore. You can't get as many worms in the deep late game with the Life After Death stuff now fully stopped. So they're not really the ultra scaling threat that you saw in this game now that those changes have been implemented. However, they scale sooner now because you can make the capital only mage that, you know, pumps out these tomb worms really early. So it's a change in the timing. They're much more dangerous early. They're much less dangerous later because this bug is not bug, but this feature of life after death is no longer abusable. So, yeah. I don't think I would change much in Dominions 5. In Dominion 6, I think you'd have to really think through what you're going to do now. You could try to do something similar, or you could take it in a different direction. I think the nation's pretty versatile in terms of what you play and how you pick for your blesses. So I think that's it. I think that's it. We'll go ahead and put this victory thing up here. We'll watch it again. Here's our expansion and our dominion. Oh, we need to look at all the graphs, so we're not quite done. Okay, before I do this, let's look at all the graphs. I thought I was done. I realized we haven't showed you everything. Forts, we were crushing forts. Otherwise, this looks like Erythia and Ulm tied. Forts for us were particularly important because we were making very cheap priests out of them. So that's why we wanted to have a lot of them. So we would spend we weren't making mages, right? We were making like 80 gold priests. So we were spending far less per fort than any other nation, which meant we had a lot of surplus gold to reinvest in forts, which let us buy more of these little H2 priests, which were super cheap. So that's the reason our fort graph was crazy in this. Income, you can see Ulm cast Gift of Nature's Bounty was almost twice my income. And then when we cast it, we were far more than him. If he kept this up too, there's a decent chance he could have turned that into a win, but he would have needed to win that major battle, and I don't think having more gold was going to help him win that battle on that throne. Kalen was the income leader for a while, also adding to their scariness as... I think this was a super winnable Kalen position. Like, I'm not just fear-mongering them in retrospect. Kalen totally could have had a extremely legitimate push for a win. Not even a throne rush, just a hardcore, I'm going to just start killing everybody right around here. And they were income leader at the time. If they killed somebody else, maybe, especially if they picked the timing of that right. Like, other people were quagmired in a war, maybe only one other person could help them. So that other person helps, and they, like, in the name of defense, kill that other player too. Now they're up 2 players. And then people start, that's how these games spiral out of control against flyers. Things can go crazy really quick. Anyway, Caleb winning the income graph for a while. I mean, for a long time, dude. Look at this. Really, this is like the middle 30 turns. This is a long time from here all the way basically till here, to their fall. They were winning income. Then switched to Ulm for a bit, then me, then Ulm, then me, then Ulm, then me. Gym income. Caleb crushing gym income for most of the game. Again in position 1 for gym income. So Caleb really, even though, you know, they weren't necessarily the biggest in provinces, were just crushing a lot of these score graphs. Arco was in position 2 for a good long while. And then we passed them a little bit, eked into position 2. And then we're like very much neck and neck with Caleb for a while on gym income. We got to be in position 1 for just a hot minute here. And then Ulm pops into it for a second, and then we're position 1 in gym income for the rest of the game. And this is where we really, it's right around here that we started spiraling out of control in a lot of these graphs. But it's not necessarily obvious, like right here, that it was going to happen. It was more like a risk that it could. Research, who finished first? First Caleb, right? Then I believe it was Arco. They finished research next. Then it was Erythia, and then Ulm, and then us. And then nobody else finished. Honorable mention to Man, who was position 1 for a little while here, and then position 2 for a good stretch. Ultimately, they had to commit just a ton of mages to this war to end Utgard. They had huge mage support, and that slowed their research down, which also kind of slowed the snowball. There was a period where we were all really worried about Man running away with the game. That was until Arco started kind of leaking exactly what Caleb's research looked like. And I think it's pretty clear looking at these graphs that in this middle region of the game, Caleb really was the major threat. Dominion. Yeah, we did pretty good here. We were middle of the pack until about right here, and then we were top of the pack, and then over here we finally became number 1. Army size, this is a fun one. Ulm is often winning these army graph things because of the wolves. They can just free spawn a ton of wolves. And yeah, we made that pretty small. I want to, let's see if we can go back. I can show you this. When did we start? There's a tiny, if you remember from looking at the early army graphs, there's a tiny hiccup when it starts. And after that hiccup, we were like, oh man, it shot up so hard right after the hiccup. And this was it just shooting up, just rocket shipping up. And we're like, oh my God, we're making 40 worms a turn. It's going up so fast. Guys, holy shit, look at it. Oh, and then we did another batch and it was going up so fast. It's basically flat. It's flat. We have grown the scale of the graph so large that this early super steep increase is flat. And yeah, there were a few turns here where we lost some. This was like a major Erythian victory, I think. But for the most part, it's just up and up and up. Invest in worms, double your money. So yeah, this was pretty cool. This is basically the graph that won the game for us. Let's not kid ourselves here. Now, I mean, it matters what type of troops you're making, but this is really where we were pulling away. And I think this is what Arca was seeing. They had Eyes of God up. They could see the graph. I was doing everything I could to hide how much of it was worms. And there was a lot of evidence that, because we'd also this is not all worms, right? And especially at the beginning, we were making a lot of long dead. And that's because I was intentionally getting a lot of holy ones so that I could make a lot of long dead. And why did I want the long dead? I wanted to patrol all the provinces around where I was doing my worm conversion because I didn't want anybody to see it. And I couldn't find a good province to do it. So the only province I had to do it, I think I had like 6 connections. So there were like 6 provinces I needed 100 undead in. So I put undead in all those provinces. So that took a lot. So we had a significant amount of just long dead production just to get there. And then, of course, once those holy ones had been making that long dead to make that happen, well, they kept doing it. So we continued to have a significant portion of long dead as part of our army. However, as the game went on, we weren't really interested in making more long dead. So our ratio for the however many, if we're making 100 size units of troops a turn, or 200 or whatever the number is, our ratio of how much of that, 1 or 200 was long dead versus tomb worms, it was way more long dead at the start. And it really only shifted into being like almost all tomb worms by the end. And we were making some tomb worms as soon as we could. We had Tomb Kings doing it even early. So, we were trying to make them. But we were more concerned with patrol chaff early. But yeah, this was obviously super important. And I think, now we're going to end with the victory graph. And I'll just share final thoughts. I think Late Age Ctis is a tough nation to play now in Dominion 6, and a lot of that's because it's stronger and everybody knows that it's stronger. So like you scale better out of the gate. I think there's a good change. So the change of getting rid of life after death, Late Age Ctis is now, I think, reasonably well balanced in that, yeah, they're really strong. Yeah, they have some cool scaling mechanics. But you can no longer just like basically break the game with the life after death scaling. That is the real true hammer of Late Age Ctis, and that's been taken away. So now you get this cool scaling production out of your capital. Yeah, it's kind of a lot, but that's kind of your main trick. The scales troops are better too, which also gives you reasons to maybe not overinvest in the bless. So I think it's a really interesting nation. Now, I don't think it's a nation you have to kill on sight. I think it's a strong nation. I think it's a nation you might consider killing on sight because you're greedy, because you want their stuff, and it'd be nice to deal with them sooner than later because they scale well. But they don't have the crazy scaling that you've seen in this game, in Dominion 6 anymore. With the life after death changes, That scaling is not possible. You cannot do the life after death conversions. You will not ever have an army graph like I did. Well, it'll be very difficult for you to do it. You'll have to do it in some other way that's not in the current build of the game, or figure something out that I haven't figured out. So yeah, I think late age Ctis now is in a much more balanced point. I think they're strong. If there's a good opportunity to kill them, maybe take it. But at the same token, if it's a bad matchup and things don't look like they're aligned, I don't think you have to feel like you have to. You can kill late age Ctis now. Now, the cap production is significant. The tomb worm production you get out of your cap, it's nothing to shake a stick at. But I don't think it's anything that a properly timed coalition can't fix. And I think other nations can outscale them, So it's not like, oh God, there's some 40 province nation, and then we have to go, everybody stop what you're doing, go deal with the 15 province Ctis. I would be much more worried about a 40 province other nation, So anyway, I think it's interesting because it's one of the things I said at the beginning of the series is that, like, when I'm showing you Ctis, nobody knows it's strong, so I get all sorts of advantages from that. Like, I get really good diplomacy. If you've played late age Ctis in Dominion 6 and people have seen these videos, there's a good chance they're going to fearmonger the shit out of you and coalition you, and it's going to be really hard. But also at the start of Dominion 6, when you could still do the life after death plays, they were actually, like, you actually really did need to kill them. Like, you really were on a clock when you could do the life after death conversions. Now that that's not on the table, I think they're fine to play. You can kill them kind of when you want to. If you can. If it's piloted well, you might not kill them. But I don't think there's a reason to immediately need to go kill them, is what I'm trying to say. I think they're reasonably well balanced. I think I actually approve of life after death changes. In general, I don't like removing cool shit in the game, and I consider the life after death conversion to be a form of cool shit. But I think in this case, it probably made the game better. And it certainly made Ctis have a much more even power curve. And that's actually a good thing. That's kind of the last thing I wanted to say on it, is that having a power curve where you're like kind of weak at the beginning and then invincible at the end actually kind of sucks, because then it forces everybody to kill you in a free-for-all game. And that's not always fun. And so what they've done with Ctis now is it's actually a pretty even power curve. You get tomb worms coming out right at the beginning, so it picks up the early part, and then they've tamped down the end where you can't do the life after death conversion. That said, you're still going to get, they still scale okay. There are a few other changes that were made to Ctis too, like you have better access to Astral, which I think is cool, and your troops are better and stuff like that. But I think that's it. I've repeated everything now a couple times. What I will say in final closing is I hope you've enjoyed the game. I was really excited to show this build to you guys. It was something I spent months thinking about, trying to figure out, like, how do you make a Ctis build where you can actually defend yourself in the early game and then take advantage of the scaling. We figured out all sorts of cool things with, like, this whole get repelled bless, where you're actually getting blood vengeance checks on every time you get repelled, and you pick a sacred troop that gets repelled all the time. And all the synergies that went into it. I feel like it's one of the cooler builds I've ever come up with. It was a lot of fun designing it, thinking about it, playtesting it, and then ultimately taking it into a multiplayer game. Again, special thanks to everybody in the game, and special thanks to you as the watchers. We'll see you guys next time. Cheers.